Everyone in the room chuckled when she walked in. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, didn't have a glossy resume printed on fancy paper, and her shoes were slightly worn. The other candidates sat tall, armed with degrees from top universities and corporate buzzwords. But she? She simply held a folder with a few sheets of paper, quiet, calm, and a little nervous. It was clear they didn't take her seriously. They didn't know what she had been through. They didn't know what was hidden beneath that humble appearance. It was supposed to be just another job interview for a junior analyst role at one of the city's fastest-growing tech firms. The panel was made up of managers, HR executives, and one important guest, the company's CEO, who was sitting silently at the end of the table, observing. The woman sat down, introduced herself politely, and tried to answer the first few questions. But instead of listening, some of the interviewers exchanged smirks. One even whispered loud enough for others to hear, "She looks like she walked in off the street." But then, something shifted. When they asked her to solve a logic problem on the board, she stood up, hesitated for a moment, then quietly started writing. Her method was different, unusual even. At first they rolled their eyes, but as the minutes passed, the room fell silent. One by one, the panel members leaned forward, watching as she broke down the problem in a way none of them had seen before. Her thinking was sharp, her steps precise. There was something captivating in the way her mind worked, like she saw the world through a different lens. Still, they weren't convinced. A few clapped awkwardly, others forced a smile. But the CEO? He didn't say a word. He stood up, walked to the board, and looked closely at her notes. Then he asked her one question. Something technical, something even his senior engineers had struggled with last quarter. She answered without flinching. And right then, everything changed. What followed was something no one in that room expected. Because this simple woman, the one they had laughed at just minutes earlier, held a secret that could shake the company's future, and only the CEO recognized it. But what was her story? How did she end up in that room? And what exactly did the CEO see in her that the others missed? That moment was only the beginning. Her name was Sana. She grew up in a small town where job titles didn't mean much, but hard work did. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a schoolteacher. They didn't have much, but they taught her to never stop learning. As a child, Sana would tinker with broken radios and take apart kitchen appliances just to see how they worked. She was quiet, observant, and always asking why when others were satisfied with how. But life didn't go easy on her. After finishing school, her family couldn't afford college, so she taught herself. Nights were spent reading free online, books, watching lectures, and solving problems most people would give up on. While others posted selfies, she was building small coding projects on a second-hand laptop. And though she had no degree to show for it, she had something else, an ability to understand systems, to break them down and rebuild them smarter. So, when she saw the job posting for the analyst position, she hesitated. The company was big, well-known, the kind of place that usually looked for polished graduates. But something in her said to try. She didn't expect to be welcomed with open arms, but she didn't expect to be laughed at either. The interview was her first real chance. She knew she didn't look the part. She wasn't fluent in corporate talk, didn't have internship experience, and had never set foot inside a glass office building. But she had studied their product, followed their market moves, even found a few flaws in their back-end system just from using their website. When the CEO asked her that question, the technical one, he hadn't expected much. But the way she explained the issue, suggesting a workaround that could save the company thousands in recurring server costs, caught him off guard. It wasn't just the accuracy, it was her clarity. She spoke like someone who saw 10 steps ahead. Still, the others in the room didn't get it. They whispered again, this time a little more nervously. Who was she really? Was it a lucky guess? Was she trying to impress? The CEO said nothing. He asked for her resume again, studied it, then stared at her with an intensity that made even the managers uncomfortable. He saw something, but what was it? Sana stayed seated, unaware of how much had shifted. She thought she had done well, maybe even better than expected. But she didn't know that outside that room, her name had already started circulating among the top ranks, and not everyone was happy about it. After the interview, Sana walked out quietly, her mind replaying everything. She didn't know whether she had impressed them or made a fool of herself. But what she didn't know was that upstairs, in a boardroom filled with decision-makers, her name was being discussed like a wild card no one saw coming. The CEO, Mr. Karim, was a man known for spotting talent in the most unlikely places. Years ago, he had built the company from scratch, and though it had now grown into a sleek tech giant, he never forgot what it meant to start small. That's why Sana's raw skill stood out to him. She didn't speak in rehearsed answers. She didn't try to fit in. She just solved the problem. But while he saw her as an asset, others in the room saw her as a threat. Amir, the senior recruitment officer, was one of them. He had recommended another candidate, someone polished, from a top university, who happened to be the son of an investor. Sana didn't fit into his clean plan. If the CEO backed her, it would mean questioning the whole hiring system. And Amir wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. Meanwhile, Sana returned to her small apartment on the city's edge. She shared the space with her younger brother, who looked up from his textbook and asked, "How did it go?" She smiled, nodded, and said, "Let's see what happens." But inside, she wasn't sure. She couldn't shake the feeling that some of the panel had been mocking her. Still, she wasn't bitter. She was used to being overlooked. What mattered now was that she had shown up and given it her best. Back at the company, Mr. Karim reviewed Sana's written logic work again. He even took it down to the engineering team, asking one of the lead developers to look it over. "Who wrote this?" the developer asked. When Karim said her name, the man raised his brows. This isn't beginner-level thinking. But when word got out that she might be reconsidered despite not being on the final shortlist, the pushback started. Emails were exchanged. Concerns were raised about reputation, client-facing image, and professional background. It wasn't just about skill anymore. Office politics began to surface. Some said she was too untested. Others hinted that hiring her would send the wrong message to their partners. The tension grew quietly, behind glass doors and polite smiles. And as Sana waited patiently for a callback, unaware of the quiet storm forming behind the scenes, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about what happens when real talent dares to disrupt the system. 3 days passed. No call, no email. Sana tried to distract herself by taking freelance tasks online, but her mind kept drifting back to that boardroom, to the way the CEO had looked at her work. She wasn't sure if it meant something, or if she was just reading into things too much. Her brother encouraged her to stay hopeful, but the silence was hard. Every hour that passed felt heavier. She had no connections, no referrals, and no degree to lean on, only the hope that what she did in that room had been enough. Meanwhile, inside the company, things were heating up. Mr. Karim called an emergency meeting with the department heads. He wanted to push Sana's application forward, personally. But Amir, backed by 2 senior executives, argued strongly against it. They said it set a bad precedent to favor someone outside the formal system. Their words were polite, but their tone held something else: fear. They feared what it meant if someone like Sana could outperform the ones they had already chosen. It would question their decisions, their processes, their judgment. Still, Karim refused to back down. He didn't say much in the meeting, but what he did say shook the room. If we only hire people who look good on paper, we'll miss the ones who can change the game. That line lingered long after he left, but things took a darker turn. That evening, one of the internal coordinators leaked a message, an anonymous email pointing out that Sana's resume had no verified credentials and questioning if she might have copied the solution from a forum or external source. It spread quietly among HR and some of the management staff. It wasn't confirmed, just hinted, and it was enough to plant doubt. When Kareem heard about it, he was furious. But Sana still didn't know. She was still checking her phone, refreshing her email inbox, and wondering if maybe she should just give up. She didn't know that her skills were being questioned in rooms she wasn't allowed to enter. She didn't know that her work was being analyzed line by line, this time not to admire, but to find fault. The tension reached its peak when Kareem called for one final review. He had the IT team run a deep verification check. Code pattern analysis, timestamp logs, browser history, everything. His goal was to either prove her innocence or confirm the doubt. And what they found changed everything. But just before he made the findings public, someone else stepped in, someone with power and a reason to keep Sana out. The person who stepped in was Mariam Khan, the chief operations officer, known across the company for her sharp instincts and stricter than usual standards. She had worked alongside Kareem since the early startup days, but had grown more corporate as the company expanded. She wasn't just powerful, she was strategic. And when she saw the CEO leaning toward hiring a candidate like Sana, she saw risk, not opportunity. Mariam requested the investigation results before Kareem could announce anything. "We should be cautious," she told him. "One mistake at this level can cost us investor confidence." Her words were calm, measured, but beneath the surface, something else stirred. Mariam had been grooming her own candidate for the analyst role, the daughter of a longtime board member. That person had barely made it through the problem-solving portion of the interview. But with the right backing, she was already being prepared for the offer. Sana's sudden rise threatened to derail everything. What Mariam didn't expect, however, was just how clean the verification came back. Not only was Sana's logic original, but the IT logs showed she had run several models on her personal device, days before the interview was even scheduled. The depth of her work, the structure of her notes, the method in her thinking. It wasn't copied. It was far ahead of what even their in-house junior engineers could produce. Still, Mariam wasn't ready to give up. She quietly reached out to HR and placed a freeze on all new hires in the department, citing internal review delays. She then called a private meeting with Kareem. "Let's not rush into this," she said. "We can't afford a bad headline, a risky hire, an unverified background. It could all blow back on us." But Kareem had seen enough. And now, it wasn't just about Sana's potential, it was about the principle. How many others like her had been silently rejected without a second look? He told Mariam, "This isn't about risk. It's about what kind of company we want to be." That night, as he prepared to override the freeze and offer Sana a contract directly, he received an unexpected alert from the legal department. A formal complaint had been filed anonymously, accusing him of favoritism and bypassing procedure for personal reasons. The accusation was baseless, but it triggered an automatic internal review. Suddenly, Kareem's hands were tied. The board would have to weigh in. Sana still didn't know. She simply sat in her apartment, refreshing her email again, wondering what went wrong, while the truth was, her talent had shaken a system that didn't want to change. And now, that system was fighting back. Kareem stood at the edge of the boardroom window. The city skyline stretched out before him, but his mind was racing. The anonymous complaint had stalled everything. His credibility was under review, and Sana's file was buried behind bureaucratic red tape. Time was slipping away. He knew that if he didn't act soon, her name would disappear into a pile of forgotten applicants, just like so many others with untapped brilliance. Meanwhile, Sana had almost given up. A week had passed. No reply, no offer, just silence. She told herself to move on, that maybe the company wasn't meant for someone like her. But then, late one night, her phone buzzed. It was a short message from an unknown number. "Check your email. You've got 12 hours. Confused but curious, she opened her inbox. And there it was, a direct invitation from Kareem himself to attend a private tech roundtable being hosted the next morning at company HQ. No interview, no preamble. Just a chance to show what she knew. What she didn't know was that Kareem had found a loophole. The review board couldn't stop him from inviting outside minds to participate in a public development session. If he couldn't hire her, yet, he could still give her a platform to speak. The room was filled with senior engineers, investors, even media partners. And there she was, seated quietly in the back, until Kareem introduced her. "This is Sana," he said. "She's not on our payroll, but she might be the reason we find our next big breakthrough." She was nervous at first, but as she spoke, breaking down a flaw in their data model, suggesting a scalable redesign that could reduce load times across all user platforms, the room shifted. People took notes. Some nodded. One investor actually leaned over to another and whispered, "Why haven't we hired her yet?" And then came the twist. Just as Kareem was about to announce his intent to bring her on as a consultant, Miriam entered the room. Calm, smiling. She stood, clapped, and said, "Impressive work, Sana. In fact, I've just reviewed your profile, and I'm proud to say we'll be extending you a full-time offer today." The room applauded, but Kareem froze. He realized what she had done. By stepping in at the last second, she had taken credit for the decision, reframing it as her own. The board would now see her as the one who discovered the talent, preserving her influence and shielding herself from blame. Sana smiled. Politely, unaware of the chess match playing out around her, she had finally broken in. But at what cost? And under whose name? Sana accepted the offer with quiet grace. She didn't know about the boardroom politics or who really pulled the strings. All she knew was that someone had finally seen her potential and given her a real shot. Her first day wasn't glamorous. No welcome banner, no fancy perks. But she was placed on a critical internal project, something Kareem had insisted on quietly before Miriam could shuffle her into a background role. Within weeks, Sana's work began making a clear impact. She streamlined processes that had been eating up hours of labor. She spotted inefficiencies that no one else had noticed. And slowly, the people who once laughed or ignored her began to ask for her input, sit next to her during meetings, and even credit her publicly. The junior analysts started calling her the fixer, but Sana never let the attention distract her. She stayed focused, humble, and kept building. Kareem watched from a distance, proud, but also wary. He knew what Miriam had done. She had secured her political win while letting Sana carry the weight of success. But in the end, results speak louder than credit. Investors were impressed, clients were noticing improvements, and it didn't take long for the board to realize who had truly brought value to the company. At the next quarterly review, Kareem made a bold move. He proposed a new innovation lab within the company, one built to give unconventional thinkers like Sana a platform. And he named her as one of the lab's founding leads. This time, Miriam didn't fight it. The results were undeniable. She smiled, nodded in agreement during the meeting, but said nothing. Sana's journey from a humble, self-taught outsider to a respected tech analyst was no longer a quiet whisper. Industry blogs began sharing her story. The woman who rewired? A company with no degree and no connections. People who had once doubted her now reached out asking for advice. But she never forgot where she came from or how close she came to giving up. She still took the same bus home, still ate at the same corner stall with her brother on weekends. But something inside her had changed. She had proved to herself, and the system, that real talent doesn't always come in polished packaging. And as she sat in her new office late one evening, staring at a screen full of code, she smiled. Not because she had arrived, but because she had broken through without becoming someone else. Sometimes all it takes is one chance, and the courage not to let it slip away.